Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn, and for this first part of the stepper card that I'll be creating in today's video, I'm going to do this in real time, and then as I decorate and put the rest of the card together, I'll probably do that as a sped up process video. But this is the card that I will be making, and I do have a separate video on how to create a custom stepper card. In that video, I actually make a side stepper, whereas this one's going to be a center stepper. So you can see in the front here, we have this main panel and then two steps along both sides of that. And it'll all fold down nice and neat into what will ultimately be a US A2 size card. So that's going to be 5.5 wide and 4.25 tall. So this will be a landscape top folding card. And I've designed it actually so that we have this nice center portion. This was actually by request from another viewer who commented on my custom stepper video. So this is for you. This has been designed so that you can actually feature an ATC tag. And I happen to have ones that you can get from Graphic 45. So I've designed this so that you can have this prominent middle section here to display your tag. And if you wanted, you can maybe even make a little, I think this is what I'll be doing. I'm gonna think about maybe making a little pocket here so that I can slide this tag in here. And this card almost becomes a 2-in-1. So it'll be a beautiful card, but you'll be able to kind of take this tag out and actually use it as a tag, as a gift tag that you can then gift onto somebody else. So let me talk through how to do this actual specific card in the way that I've designed it, but I'm also going to talk through how I arrived at sort of the math for figuring out the where all the score lines go, where the cut lines go. That way you can, if you want to change any of this up, you'll know how to do that and how to arrive at those different measurements. And that way you can customize it for whatever you want to display on the front of the card. So first off, let's I'll keep notes as we go, so that you'll see basically the entire sort of cut and score instructions on this sheet here. So I'm going to start off with my card base is going to be just your standard size. So it's going to be 5.5 inches wide by 8.5 inches high. Again, it's gonna be top folding. And the you can even still see my pencil marks, so this is going to be a prototype. But one thing that you want to determine is how do you want to divide up the 5.5 inch edge. So how much do you want to allocate to the steps on the side, and how much of that space do you want to allocate to this center main portion? So as I mentioned earlier, since this is designed to really showcase the ATC tag, that's how I arrived at this specific design. And what it comes out to is I'm going to have my steps are going to be 1.25 inch wide. That's these two steps here. So that gives me a total, if I have 1.25 inch here, 1.25 inch here, that's a total of 2.5 inches. This entire length here is 5.5 inches wide. So essentially in this middle portion, I've got 3 inches of this main center section. So my center, we'll call it the center, is 3 inches wide. All right, so let's start from there, and then we'll figure out the rise and fall of the steps next. So I'm gonna start with, this is a US letter size sheet of heavyweight cardstock, 120 pound, and my first cut is going to be 5.5 inches wide by 8.5 inches high. So this is the 8.5. Along the 11.5 inch edge, I'm going to line this up at 5.5, and I will give that a cut. All right, so now that we have that cut, let's make our let's sort of allocate where our steps are going to be and where our center panel is going to be. So I'll bring this back on here so that we can continue to reference this. So I'm going to measure 1 1/4 in on each side, and I'm going to draw myself a line all the way down. So along the 5.5 inch edge, I'm going to measure 1 1/4 from this edge, and I'm going to measure 1 1/4 from the right edge, so 1 1/4, and that's going to leave me 3 inches in the center here. And then I'm using my T-square ruler so I can make certain that my line is nice and squared, and I'm just going to lightly draw all the way down the length of this entire 8.5 inches here. And that's going to be important because you can see we'll be making a cut along that line, and there's different folds that are going to be happening. Some folds for the steps, some fold for the main section, and they're basically divided between where those drawn lines are and the edge of the card. So it's important to have those lines because, as you can see here, none of these score lines run all the way across the entire 5.5 inch length. They either start and end on the pencil line or on the edge of the card. So then next we need to let's decide, well, not decide. This is all going to fold down in half. So let's go ahead and score this line here. So the entire height of the card folded is 4 1/4. So this fold right here, we're going to score 4 1/4 up from one end. So I'm going to bring in my scoreboard here along this 8.5 inch edge. I'm going to score it at 4 1/4, but take note, I'm only going to score between these two pencil marks here. I'm not going to score where my steps are. So that can be a little bit tricky to do because you're not going to start your scoring right on the edge of the paper. You need to actually score it in between these lines. So what I find helpful is I'm just going to take a steel ruler. You can use any straight edge. I'm going to line this up kind of close to where the 4 1/4 is. That way I know where that sort of trench is for 4 1/4, and then I can see my pencil marks here, and I'll just score right in between there. Because it's hard to find that track, and for me anyways, just eyeball that track and start in the middle of the piece of paper here. So that's why I find having this ruler and lining that up against the score track, I can then kind of use the ruler and score against that. And I know that's going to be right in that track. And because this is a heavyweight cardstock, what I like to do is score once with the scoring tool that came with my scoreboard, but then I'm also going to score with my ball stylus, because I feel like this is a little bit smaller and can kind of get into that track a little bit more, and it just gives me a deeper score line, so that I get a nice crisp fold when I go to fold it. So we have just folded this top line here. The next thing that we want to determine, and again, I'll give you what I use, but feel free to change this to what suits your aesthetic. I'm gonna decide for myself where I want the highest step, how far up I want the highest step to be. And in this case, I'll go ahead and measure it so that you can see. This is going to be 2 3/4 of an inch. So 2 3/4 of an inch is the highest step. So I'll go ahead and mark that. Our highest step is 2 3/4 of an inch high. So let's go ahead and put that score line in. So I'll go ahead and grab my scoring tool, and here we are scoring from the edge. So again, I'm scoring this line here, this line here, and the line back here. So this is going to go from the edge up to the pencil mark, from this edge up to the pencil mark. So 2 3/4 of an inch from the edge of the card to the pencil mark. And then again, I just like to use this. I butt up my steel ruler right up against there so it's nice and squared. And then I can come all the way down to the bottom of the card and score from this edge in until it hits that pencil mark. Okay, so there we have that score line. So we've just scored this backmost line here. That line and that line is what we've scored. So now if you look at the how the fold works of the stepper, everything is going to fold down flat, and all of this extra cardstock here between the line that we just scored and the opposite end, all of that sort of accordion folds down and everything is nice and flat. So all of that cardstock needs to fold down and match the height that we established is the tallest step. So that's 2 3/4 of an inch. So now you have some fun sort of design decisions that you can make. How I like to refer to the different areas, just so that we can have a common language to talk about it, is in the stepper here, there's going to be a portion of the stepper that's visible. So when you fold it all flat, what is visible? Just these areas here, because these do get folded in on themselves, but some portion of this is going to be hidden, some portion is going to be visible. So the design decision that you get to make is, how do you want, this is again 2 3/4 of an inch. On the back, it's just, the one panel. On the front, how do you want to divide that 2 3/4 of an inch among these 3 steps? So step 1, step 2, step 3. So how do you want to divide that 2 3/4? So for my card, what I've decided is I want this first step to come up 1 1/4 inch. And then I want it to be evenly spaced for the next 2 steps. And that just happens to be 3/4 of an inch for each step. So let me start to annotate some of that on our sheet here. And let me draw this out so that maybe the illustration will help to make this clear. So that's our stepper. We've decided that the tallest step is 2 3/4 of an inch. And we've decided that this first step here is going to be, or I've decided for my card, 1 1/4 inch. But again, here I'm giving you the math so that if you don't like this particular aesthetic, you can always change it up. But the math is going to work out the same. However you want to divide these 3 steps, it needs to add up to the height of your tallest step. Let me give us some lines here. So I'm gonna give us some dash lines. This portion is hidden right in this V right here. That's hidden. And this V here is hidden. Okay? So now when we're talking just the visible portion, when everything's folded down, we have 3/4 of an inch here, and then another 3/4 of an inch there. So that is our visible portion of the stepper. And it's going to be the same on both sides, so that everything, at least that's how I'm doing it. You could actually create something that is different. So one set of steps can have a different breakdown from the other, and you can make an asymmetric card instead of making something that's symmetric. Totally up to you, and that could be actually pretty neat. But this is what I'll be going with in case you want to recreate this exact card. Now we have to determine, okay, how do I score, how do I know where to score for these valleys here, where it dips and there's the hidden? So basically, this section here, if I pinch this flat and closed, this is visible, 1 1/4 inch. Then we go down, that's hidden. We come back up, that's hidden. And then we have another visible section that's 3/4 of an inch. Then if I pinch this down closed, we go down, we come back up, all of that's hidden, down and up, hidden. And here's that final 3/4 of an inch that's visible. So let's determine how to figure out how much cardstock is there. So to do that, it's a bit of math, but it's not too terribly difficult. So let's look at this entire stretch of cardstock. We start off with a piece that is 8.5 inches long. So let's start there, 8.5 inches long. And then we made that first score line at the height, the maximum height. That was 2 3/4. So let's remove 2 3/4 from that, and that's going to give us this length of cardstock here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that math now. Okay, so then we have 5 3/4. That's this length here. And if you don't want to do the math, you can also just measure it. So 5 3/4 from the top of our step. That's the top of our step to the end of the paper on the opposite end. Okay, so we've eliminated this back portion here. Now let's take away from the cardstock remaining. Let's take away what's visible, and what's visible is another 2 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to take away what's visible, 2 3/4 of an inch. And that leaves me 3 inches. So what's hidden in all these folds is actually 3 inches of cardstock. So that's what's hidden here. If I fold that down, what's hidden is 3 inches of cardstock. And that 3 inches of cardstock is basically one section going down, one segment going up, and then again, another segment going down and another segment coming up. Now you could technically divide that however you want, but I find the easiest thing to do is just make them all equal to one another. These two have to match and those two have to match. And so it's just easy to divide that length, that 3-inch length of cardstock that's hidden, just divide that by 4, and then you'll have your 4 segments. So this is 3 inches. 3 inches divided by 4 equals 3/4 of an inch. And so that's basically our hidden sort of step portion, right? The hidden portion of our steps. Okay, so now let's go ahead and score. We've already scored this line here. Let's now score the rest of these lines. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 more lines that we need to score. And we have all of the information that we've determined or calculated to put in the rest of those score lines. So they'll be the same on both sides. And so so what you do, at least on my card design, what you do on this side, you'll do on that side, just like when we scored those first 2 lines. So what I'm going to do is, this is the end that I scored 2 3/4. This is the back of my card. That's the back of the card right here. What I'm going to do is, if my card is aligned like that, what I'm going to do is going to turn this around 180 so that I'm scoring on the bottom front edge. Basically, that's what I've done. So I can measure from this bottom front edge of the card. Okay, so again, this is that score line that was 2 3/4 of an inch from the bottom back edge. And now we're going to start scoring for the steps that you see from the front. So we said that we wanted our first step to be 1 1/4 of an inch tall. So that's going to be my first score line. I'm going to go 1 1/4 inch, and I'm going to start on the edge of the card and score just to the pencil line. I'm not going to score past that. I need to make that same score line from the bottom or the other end of the card. So I'm just going to line up my ruler on the 1 1/4 inch and use that as a guide so that I'm scoring from the opposite end of the card up to the pencil mark. Then, so we've now scored this line here. Next, we need to go down one of those hidden step segments. And our hidden step segment is 3/4 of an inch. So this line here that we need to score is going to be 3/4 of an inch from our previous score line. Okay, so our previous score line was at 1 1/4. 3/4 of an inch from 1 1/4 will bring us to 2 inches. So I'm going to score it at 2 inches from the edge, right up to the pencil mark, but not past it. I'm going to bring in my ruler, line it nice flush up with the top of my scoreboard at that 2-inch mark. And then from the opposite end of the card, I'm going to come in from the edge of the card base and score up to that pencil mark. And that gets me that line. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flip this around to the back, and I'm going to rescore on those 2 lines just exactly right over top of it, because typically what you want to do is you want to fold all of your score lines as mountain folds. And these score lines here, from the other side are going to be valley folds. So that's why if I fold this on this end, it'll maintain the structure of the cardstock a little bit better. Okay, so now we've scored from this edge here, we've scored our first step 1¼ inches up. We've scored this line here 3/4 of an inch down. Now let's see how we arrive at our next step. So our next step has to come back up that same hidden portion. That's 3/4 of an inch. And we decided that what's visible on this second step is going to also be 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to add another 3/4 of an inch. In total, I'm going to come up from this bottom score line here by 3/4 of an inch plus 3/4 of an inch, a total of 1½ inches. And that's going to bring me to this score line here. All right, so we left off at 2 inches and we said we need to go up 1½ inches. So basically 3/4 of an inch plus another 3/4 of an inch will take us to 3½ inches. So I'm going to put a score line there. And I'm going to score from the edge of the card to the pencil mark and not beyond. I'm going to line up my steel ruler just so that I have I can carry that line I know where to start on the opposite end, and I can score from the edge of the card again to the pencil mark here. So I don't want to score through this middle section. That's what's going to keep this nice. It's going to keep the center panel nice and flat. All right, so we've scored our first step, our bottom portion, hidden portion, then our second step, and then now we just need to go down the hidden portion again. So that's down another 3/4 of an inch. So I just need to score 3/4 of an inch from our last score line. And that's going to take, we left off at 3½ so that means we're going to actually end up scoring at 4¼ just happens to line up that way, which is kind of nice. So again, I'm going to come in from both sides and score at 4¼ okay. Now that line, that 4¼ line here, because it's a valley fold, this one right here, because that's a valley fold, I'm going to do the same thing I did with that last valley fold. Flip it over to the back and score that again, but from the back side. Okay, so now we have all of our score lines in, but we need to make a couple of cuts. So you can see here, this is my prototype. I cut a little bit too far on this one, but what you want to do is you want to cut from the top of your topmost step and the top of your first step. You just want to cut right along the pencil line between those two score lines there. So there's two ways that you can do this. You can either, it basically amounts to cutting from your first score line that you see here and the last score line that you see there. Just cut right in between those two. So you can do that one of two ways. You can do, just use a steel ruler. I'll show you that. Line up your steel ruler along your pencil mark. And you can either use a craft knife. I'm very comfortable with a utility blade. I like to always swap this out so that it's always a nice sharp blade. And I'm just gonna I find it helpful to put my utility blade right on the pencil mark and right at the first score line so that I can then butt my steel ruler up against that, make sure my steel ruler is lined up with the pencil line on the bottom. So now I know it's nice and straight. And then I can start cutting down right between the two score lines, the first score line and the last score line. And you can, hopefully you've got a really nice sharp blade. And if it's not sharp, I would highly recommend swapping it out for a new blade, because you don't want to be putting a lot of pressure. It's when you have to put a lot of force that if you slip, there's more potential for serious injury. So you want to just be able to keep your blade nice and sharp so that you don't have to use a lot of force in order to cut through. So there's my cut. Now I need to do the same thing on the other side. If you are not comfortable with a craft knife and a steel ruler, hopefully what you have is a trimmer like this. This is the We Are Memory Keepers all-in-one tool. And what's nice about it is that this blade has a track that it will slide along, and you can just drop it in the middle of your piece of cardstock and run it for down whatever length that you want. So what I'm gonna do is, I know this is 1¼ inches in, and I actually have a there's a ruler on this side, on this teal plate here, and there's obviously ruler markings on this side. But since I know this section is 1¼ I can actually just line that up, this edge here, with 1¼ and that's going to put my pencil mark right in this cutting track here. And along the this plastic hinge here, there's also a ruler. And so I can drop my blade in at, it happens to be, our first step is 1¼ inch up. So I can drop my blade in at 1¼ run my blade down until it hits the opposite score line, which happens to end at 5 3/4. If you don't want to use the ruler, what you can do is, I'm just gonna make a pencil mark to extend my score line so that I can see where to start and stop my my cut. And the blade, on the blade itself, there's actually a groove in this plastic here, the little handle that you would hold to slide your cutting blade. That little groove marks the tip of the blade. So I can then line up that groove on this handle here with my pencil mark here, or again, you can use the ruler, whichever is easier for you. For me, I can see this groove more easily. And so I can drop that in so that it lines up with my pencil mark, run this blade down until it hits the pencil mark on my opposite end. These pencil marks, remember, I've just lined up with my first score line and my last score line for the steps. And then that's it. So there's two different ways of cutting your stepper. Whatever works for you, and with whatever you happen to have in your craft room. Then the last thing that we need to do is fold. So let's go ahead. I'm going to bring this back on so we have a reference that you can look at as I do this. So let's fold this first. So that's the top of our card. And basically, if you've done the scoring the way that I suggested, every score line is going to be folded as a mountain fold. So where if there's an indentation, you want to fold up. So I'm going to just start the fold there. Then on, let's fold these two. So I can go ahead and fold that. And I'm going to burnish each of these score lines more aggressively. And as I fold, I can just sort of start to pinch like this so that it starts to do the valley fold on the bottom too. And then I'll go ahead and fold the second one. And again, putting, one finger, two fingers kind of on either end of that score line, I can sort of pinch and then valley fold at the same time to create that accordion. And then we just need to fold the topmost step, like that. Okay, so now once you've sort of started to fold these, then you can sort of pinch everything together and fold it down really flat. And to make sure that this has nice crisp folds, I like to go through and with a bone folder burnish each of those folds. And there you have it. Then it starts to lay nice and flat, nice and compressed, and it will stand. So you can see the difference. I have not burnished these score lines at all on this one. And you can see how it's so like spread out. The the steps aren't you know, it's so spread out this way. Whereas this, once you burnish these lines here, they're gonna all fold down really flat, and it's going to stand up really nicely for you. And it's not going to sort of do the giraffe legs where it just starts to kind of spread out like that. So that's the importance of burnishing your score lines. And then now you can just decorate. So we can also take a moment, maybe I should have done this before burnishing, but you can take a moment to kind of erase all of your pencil marks. And fold that all flat again, and we're good to go. So now it's just a matter of decorating. And so we've got a really nice, fun easel card for attaching or for, you know, showcasing an ATC tag. Okay, so if you happen to have skipped the beginning part where I show you how to do all of the math to figure it out and custom design your own center stepper, here's what all of the measurements work out for the two cards that I'll be making in this video. I'm starting off with a card base that is 120-pound heavyweight cardstock. It's cut to 5.5 by 8.5. And 1 1/4 inches in from the edge, I am going to give myself little tick marks at 1 1/4, 2, 3.5, 4 1/4, and 5 3/4. Those are my score lines. There's one line that actually gets scored all the way across from edge to edge, and that's the one that's at 4 1/4. The rest of the score lines are only scored up to the cut line. And the cut line is what I've just cut there. I've dropped my blade in at that 1 1/4 mark, and then I cut from there to the 5 3/4 mark. And I did that on both sides. And here you can see I'm scoring just from the outer edge up to that cut line. Some of these are going to be valley folds, some are going to be mountain folds. I like to flip my card base to the backside and score my valley folds from the back, because generally you want to fold your score lines as mountain folds. So if you have a valley fold, then you just want to score from the backside. So because this cardstock is thick, I did go in with a ball stylus and just reinforce those score lines so that they're a little bit deeper, and that just breaks down the paper fiber even more. And I did create a nicer template that's going to be posted on the Graphic 45 blog. So I'll leave a link to that in my description box below. That way, if you didn't write down the dimensions that were on my little cheat sheet just here, and you still want to be able to recreate this card, pop on over to the Graphic 45 website, and then you can download that image. So last minute, I decided I want to actually add an easel stand. So if you've ever made cards that are tent folded like this, sometimes they can have the tendency to kind of continue to kind of splay and then fall flat. This card's standing up just fine, but an easel stand will help to mitigate that. So this piece was already trimmed to 5.5, so it's going to be the full width of my card, and it's just a piece of scrap, so I'm going to start scoring. So I've scored at 3/8 of an inch, then I'm going to score at 2 7/8, and then I'm going to cut it off at 3 1/4. So basically this is 5.5 by 3 1/4, and I've scored 3/8 of an inch on both ends. And that one end of this is going to be a glue tab that will get attached, and I'm just going to miter those corners, just a nice just diagonal cut. And then on the other end, that's going to be sort of the stopper. And so I'm going to round that corner because that tab will be visible. And you'll see in a moment when I put my card together how this gets attached to your card base. But it's really simple, easy. You can actually make this whatever width that you want. There's going to be some limitations if you want this to be able to fold down nicely into your card. So it'll get that glue tab gets attached to the back like this. And then your card is going to get, the front of your card will get tucked behind, and you can see this will fold up. So you're going to be limited by where that your top stair step is. But this folds down really nicely, and you can still put it through the mail. Okay, so now I'm figuring out my mat layer. So I've cut this piece to 5 1/4 wide, and what I'm going to do is cut 3 inches down and 1 1/4 inch inward from the both ends, and that's going to give me a nice white border all the way around as a decorative layer to my the front, the center step, and the bottom. And then the leftover pieces that are 1 1/4 by 3 inches, I can use the back side of this paper. This paper is from the coordinating solids and textures for the Let It Snow collection. And so those I'm saving, and I'm just going to flip it over to the back because it's perfectly coordinated, and it adds, it's actually a little bit more patterned, and there's a little bit more contrast to it. So I like that one side is a little bit more subtle, and then the other side has a little bit more of a bright design, so that you can kind of mix and match them, and that way the center panel, whatever I put in front there, is going to have a nice, more solid background, and that way the background doesn't really detract, but the sides have that extra little splash of snowflakes. So I have pulled out the ephemera pack that is part of the Let It Snow collection, and there are a lot of fun die cuts. Now, I wanted to use some of the snowflakes, but then I realized the snowflakes are already on the pattern paper, so I don't have to really use them on this. So I decided to just use a one of the sentiment tags or banners, and I'm just gonna loop some ribbon and knot it from the front. Just for like a little decorative touch. And then this card's going to come together really quickly because the ephemera makes it so easy. You've got your sentiment, you've got your focal image, and you even have some accent pieces that you can add as well. I'm using a little bit of my low profile foam. This is only 1 millimeter thick, and I love it. This has become a staple in my craft room because it's nice for just adding a little bit of dimension just for the look of it, not for functionality of something like making room for shaker bits. That is where I tend to want my thicker foam. So this is nice because it'll make sure, especially since we have so many folded layers of cardstock, that this will still go through the mail nicely. And then here I'm gonna add my bird die cut, and I love that it's cut from double-sided paper as well, so you can use either color that you want, but I really wanted to keep to the blue here. And this is how it stands up. So it'll fold down really nicely, as you can see, but then when it stands up, because we have that little bit of a lip on the easel stand, it's not going to continue to kind of spread out. As you can kind of see this one, see how it's sort of getting more and more open. Now on this one, for that center panel, I opted to not have the white border. I wanted it to go all the way to the edge. So instead of cutting my initial panel 1/4 of an inch shorter and more narrow, I cut it exactly to 5.5 by 4.25. And then I did the same thing. I cut 3 inches down and 1.25 inches over from the edge. And so again, the pieces of 3" by 1/4 inch I am saving, and I'm using that to decorate the other side, or the stair steps to the side. And I did trim off a little bit of the length from that 3" the height of these, and that's because we have so many folds, and so you lose a little bit of cardstock in that fold. So you want to trim that 1/4 inch wide strip, not exactly in half at 1.5 inches, but you want to just give it, maybe trim a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch off so that everything still folds nicely. And then what I decided to do was add some ribbon, but the ribbon is actually attached to my card base, and that makes the tag actually removable. And so the tag is actually going to be a gift that they can untie and then use. And I wanted to add a bit of a sentiment to the tag kind of last minute. So I broke into the sticker pack that's included in the paper, the 12 by 12 paper pad. And I found this one that I thought worked really well. But I wanted to actually put the bird that's on a branch above it. So then I ended up having to fussy cut out another bird. And I fussy cut the flowers that you see at the bottom, and this bird out of the 8 by 8 paper pad from Let It Snow. And I'm just going to use some glue gel to attach this right over top of the initial one. That way I get it nice and layered. And I did use the, again, this is green paper from the Patterns and Solids 12 by 12 paper pad in the Let It Snow collection. And so my tag, I've die cut the matte layer using the Graphic 45 large tag die set, because it also comes with the ATG die that cuts out the perfect matte. And I've cut out the matte layer for the back of this tag too. So the front and the back are decorated. So here's a final look at the 2 center stepper easel cards that I've made today, featuring the Graphic 45 Let It Snow collection. This is actually a variation on the Graphic 45 card kit. It was their stair step card kit from earlier this year. I think it was April 2022. And so if you're looking for another stair step design, you can go ahead and check out the project sheet that is available on the Graphic 45 website. And I'll link to that in the description box below as well. So I love that this is a removable, this ATG tag is a removable element because it is a really nice high quality tag, and also because it just adds a little gift component to your card as well. So you've got a little bit of a 2-in-1 there. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. And if you want to catch new videos as I publish them, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing the notification bell. Thanks so much. Until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.